What's up? It's T-Dog Reviews, and I'm sure a lot of you remember that a few years ago I made a top 20 manga list where I gave a pretty spicy take saying that the best shonen manga was none other than My Hero Academia.
They stole it from me, Carmine! They took it! That was today! Today!
Since then, I've come to my senses after rereading Hunter x Hunter volumes 20 through 36, and I've finally realized that the best shonen manga is none other than Hunter x Hunter. And I feel like one of the main reasons why I've come to appreciate Hunter x Hunter more recently is because on reread, I kind of remembered a lot of what I really liked about Hunter x Hunter when I first read it. Because I read the majority of the series when I was pretty young, so a lot of the earlier stuff kind of blanked my mind. But I do want to say real quickly that One Piece could probably take this position at some point in the future, because I'm like 80 chapters behind, so if Wano has a lot of really crazy stuff, maybe One Piece could really take the cake again, but we'll see. But for this video, I'm basically going to be going through each of the Hunter x Hunter arcs, giving my brief opinions on each one, and then when I get to the Chimera Ant arc, the election arc, and of course, the Dark Continent arc, I'm going to be going a little bit more in depth since, you know, that's what I reread. So starting off with the Hunter exam arc, I mean, this is an utter classic. And what better way to start a series than with a classic exam arc? And a lot of people say that this was one of the biggest influences to the Chunin exams arc in Naruto. And I think that much is obvious. I mean, anyone who's read Hunter x Hunter and Naruto can see the similarities there. And that's not me hating on Naruto or anything. I mean, Naruto is a classic too, but come on now. I mean, that's just the perfect way to start off the series, and Hunter x Hunter is clearly the better manga, even though both smack. So next up is the Heaven's Arena arc, and I feel like when I first read this arc, I liked it, but I didn't really appreciate all of the influences that went into it. And what I mean by that is, since reading the Heaven's Arena arc, I've read all of Yu Yu Hakusho and all of Dragon Ball, and I feel like the Heaven's Arena arc clearly has a lot of influences from early Dragon Ball, you know, one of the best manga of all time, classic Dragon Ball, and Togashi clearly pulled a lot of things from the Dark Tournament saga in this previous series, Yu Yu Hakusho, which is also an incredible manga, but come on now, I mean, anything by Yoshihiro Togashi is bound to be good. And I feel like looking back on the Heaven's Arena arc after reading Yu Yu Hakusho and the GOAT Dragon Ball, you know, I just really appreciate the arc even more now because I can see all of the influences that went into it. And it's really interesting to see just how much Yoshihiro Togashi has progressed and how his writing style has changed since the Dark Tournament saga in Yu Yu Hakusho. So after that is the York New City arc / the Phantom Troop arc. And I'm going to be completely honest here, out of all of the arcs in Hunter x Hunter, this is probably the one that I remember the least. And that's not anything against the arc, I mean, it's an incredible arc, but I never really reread this arc, and I didn't watch this entire arc in the Hunter x Hunter anime, because I really haven't seen the entire show, you know, I'm more of a manga guy. But overall, this is a great arc, I've really got to reread it, but the Kurapika versus Uvogin fight is definitely one of my top 10 favorite fights in the entire series, and what can I say, it's an utter classic. So after the York New City arc is none other than the Greed Island arc. And again, I mean, this arc is not something that I reread or watched in the anime, so I can't really speak about it too much, but it combines Hunter x Hunter and video games.
You know, the reason why I lost that game is because the fucking defense... No, it wasn't the defense. It wasn't the defense. It was because my team sucked.
So if you're a video game fan like me...
It was because my team was so bad.
And if you like Hunter x Hunter like this guy, I mean, what can I say? You're probably gonna like this arc. And I really wish I could speak more about the Greed Island arc, because this is genuinely like my second favorite, or maybe third favorite arc in the series, but it's just been such a long time since I've read it, so I don't really want to just like pretend like I know what I'm talking about, because I'd really just be speaking off of how much I remember enjoying it. So at some point, I've really got to reread this arc and the York New City arc. But after the Greed Island arc is probably my favorite arc in the entire series, and honestly probably one of my top 5 favorite manga arcs in general. And you guys already know what it is. If you've read Hunter x Hunter, if you've seen Hunter x Hunter, if you know anything about Hunter x Hunter, you've probably heard a lot about this arc. And for good reason. You know, this arc has a lot of really mature storytelling, it has some great themes, it really steps up a few notches, it gets more symbolic, and Meruem is probably one of my favorite manga antagonists ever. Now, to the average Joe, common manga reader, you know, that might not seem like too big of a statement, you know, if someone's only read like 2 or 3 manga, and you know, this is like the best manga antagonist, that might not really be a huge statement. But I've read hundreds upon hundreds of manga volumes, probably somewhere around the range of like, I don't know, 800 to 900 volumes of manga, and there's some great villains out there. I mean, Griffith, Toguro, Sensui, Obito, Itachi, if he can even be considered a villain. I mean, the list just goes on. And out of all of those villains, Meruem has constantly been at the top. And after rereading this arc, I feel like I understand his character even more. And I think Meruem's character arc throughout his time in the series is one of the best parts of Hunter x Hunter. And it's a direct parallel to Gon's character arc in this story arc. And what I mean by that is at the start of the Chimera Ant arc, Meruem is a complete maniac. He's just going around, you know, killing his disciples left and right. Anyone that stands in his way, he's just slashing them down. And he's definitely the most intimidating and unstoppable character in the entire series at that point. And if he remained that strong, if he was just, you know, going on like an incline, just getting stronger and stronger, he would definitely be undefeatable. But throughout the arc, he gets progressively more human. And the reason this happens is because Meruem plays this board game with a blind girl named Komugi. And Komugi isn't physically strong whatsoever, but she's incredibly good and strategic at this board game. And at times, she's either equally as good or even better than Meruem. And it's this constant, you know, strategic battle between the two to see who is going to win in this board game. And I feel like if someone doesn't really understand this arc, they might just kind of read the series and they might be like, oh, I mean, this arc is just overly long, you know, the board game stuff is kind of unnecessary, you know, it's kind of a snooze fest, you know, they might be kind of bored by it. But I think that all of the board game stuff in the Chimera Ant arc makes for such an incredible character arc with Meruem, because it really shows how strategic he is, both on the battlefield and in a board game. And at the end of this arc, when Meruem finally faces off against Netero, you can clearly see how his board game strategies carried over into real battles. And it's actually nuts. And with that being said, I just want to say that the Netero versus Meruem fight at the end of the Chimera Ant arc is one of my favorite manga fights of all time, and for good reason. And on the other side of things, the main character, Gon, slowly gets more and more monstrous. And, you know, he starts off being this naive, innocent kid, but after he's seeing all this crazy stuff that happened to Kite, and after he sees what Pito did, he just snaps. And at the end of this arc, there's a direct parallel between Meruem and Gon. And both characters basically make their own sacrifices that change the entire rest of the series. Not only this, but the character Netero also has a really big moment when he detonates the rose bomb just so that he can attempt to kill Meruem. And in the process of doing this, Netero basically puts thousands of people at risk of getting caught in the rose bomb. And I think it's pretty clear that Netero already factored that into the equation when he blew up the rose bomb, but to him that was better than the alternative, because he basically knew that Meruem was a complete and utter maniac who was beyond reason. And overall, the Chimera Ant arc is genuinely such a fantastic arc. It has some amazing writing, some amazing characters are introduced, such as the GOAT Ikalgo, who's unironically one of my favorite Hunter x Hunter characters ever. And if you haven't read Hunter x Hunter, or if you're currently reading Hunter x Hunter and you haven't gotten to this point, well, you're in for a treat, because this is an incredible arc. So the next arc after the Chimera Ant arc is none other than... And there's basically kind of like two arcs going on at the same time with this one. There's the election arc, and there's the arc with Killua's sister, Nanika. And I think this is a really interesting arc. I honestly think the election arc is more interesting than the Nanika/Aluka arc, but overall, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Both arcs kind of tie into each other, because both these storylines are basically resolving what happened with Netero and Gon at the end of the Chimera Ant arc. Something I really like about this arc, though, is that Leorio really gets some time to shine in this arc. And I think that's definitely pretty important, because throughout the series, Leorio was one of those characters that kind of fell into the background. I mean, Gon, Killua, and Kurapika all had their time to shine, and they all basically had their own individual arcs where they really stood out and sort of became the main character. But throughout the series, Leorio never really got that main focus. Whereas in this arc, he really comes into the forefront, and him being the main rival for the character Periston adds a really nice dynamic here, and it really makes for a great story. Now, when I first read this arc, I thought it was pretty good, but I honestly enjoyed it even more on reread, because I feel like now I've kind of, seen some more real-world elections, so I feel like now I can kind of have some more stuff to compare it to. And I definitely think that Yoshihiro Togashi does a really good job at realistically writing an election arc, and I think, there are a lot of parallels to this arc and real-world events. And I think one of the most interesting takeaways in this arc that a lot of people might just overlook is a passage from the Hunter Bylaws Article 4, which reads, "Hunters shall not target other hunters unless they have committed heinous crimes." And with this arc, that might not seem super relevant, but with the next arc, that's really going to play a big role later on, and I think that Hunter Bylaw is definitely going to come in later, and it's definitely going to strongly affect Hisoka. Next up is the last arc of Hunter x Hunter, which is currently still ongoing, and that's of course none other than... And I know some people kind of consider this like several different arcs. Some people consider it like a Dark Constant prelude, the Succession War arc, and then maybe like one more mini arc in there. But if we're being completely honest here, I mean, it's really just one big arc. And maybe later it'll be a kind of like separate arcs, but for now, I really just consider it one big arc. Now, throughout the years, my opinion on the Dark Continent arc in Hunter x Hunter has changed significantly. And what I mean by that is a while ago when this arc was ongoing and I was reading it week by week, I was pretty critical of this arc. I mean, especially in some of the really wordy chapters in this arc, I wasn't a big fan of it just because I didn't find it super interesting and I found it overly confusing. But on reread, it really isn't a snooze fest if you just take your time with it. I mean, listen, it's not something you could just blow through in like one sitting. You're not gonna burn through like 5 volumes or so in like an hour. It's gonna take you some time. But if you really sit down, if you commit to this arc, if you reread some things here and there, I think you're really gonna like this arc, because I went from being a hater of the Dark Constant arc to really loving this arc. Like, this is genuinely like top 3, at least top 4 favorite Hunter x Hunter arcs for me, and that's definitely saying a lot considering every arc in the series is pretty great. And I feel like one of the reasons why I used to be so critical of this arc was because I used to basically just read the chapters as fast as I could so I could just pump out the chapter reviews, because I actually used to, weekly review Hunter x Hunter chapters, and I think I actually put all those videos on private because I don't think they accurately reflected my opinions on the series. But sitting down and reading this arc by the volume physically is just such a nice experience, and it's genuinely just such an incredible arc, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes in the future. And I really hope that Yoshihiro Togashi can continue to make more chapters of this arc, even if it's just here and there. And something that I especially like about volume 33 is this volume basically feels like the passing of the torch for the series. I mean, this volume basically marks the end of Gon's story, and now Kurapika is really the main character. And before this, Kurapika was already one of my favorite characters. I mean, he was probably like my second or third favorite character in the series, and now he's probably either my first or second favorite character in the series. And I definitely think that was a very bold move of Yoshihiro Togashi to just switch the main character of the series that drastically, because in the series Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama was originally going to switch the main character to Gohan. And honestly, I think that would have been more interesting. But, that didn't really work out too well, and the main character just switched back to Goku. But I really like how Yoshihiro Togashi just fully commits to this, and he makes it such an interesting story. And one of the princes in this arc, Saradnik, has a direct connection to Kurapika, because Saradnik literally has the rest of the Kurta clan's red eyes. And honestly, I think that this arc is basically going to be the last arc in Hunter x Hunter, so once Kurapika gets the rest of his clan's eyes, and once they get to the Dark Continent, I think that's really going to be an incredible conclusion to the series. Maybe Hunter x Hunter will never end, but one day, if it does end, it will go down as the greatest shonen manga of all time. And even if it doesn't reach that point, it already is. Anyways, guys, with all that being said and done, that about wraps it up for this video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to give a big ol' smack to that like button. Subscribe, drop a comment letting me know what you think of this video or Hunter x Hunter. And with all that being said and done, I will see you guys in the next spicy video.